Okay, so being your son, I've heard the whole university story so many times. But seeing as you're the vice chancellor of a university, that's the equivalent of a president in the United States, right?
Correct.
So, yeah. So why don't you tell me how that came to be and how you basically birthed the whole idea of the university?
First of all, I should tell you that I have done over 2,000 plus media interviews.
Uh-huh.
I've been doing this since a college student.
Yeah.
My first early interview with media interaction was when I was a student at Loyola College, Madras in 1990s. I've never been more tense than, today.
I can hear the
being
difference in the
interviewed by
voice.
my son, so let me try my best. But it's a pleasure to be here in your podcast. So, it's the idea essentially was based on experience of being a student. I was so privileged to have studied in two good Indian institutions, Loyola College Madras, where I did my undergraduation, and University of Delhi, Campus Law Center, Faculty of Law, where I did my law degree. And with those two experiences of being in higher education in India, I earnestly believed that those were, and those are indeed, amazing institutions and had great experiences there. With that, I had the aspiration to study abroad, and so I got the Rhodes Scholarship.
Yeah, so we will talk about the university and abroad education later, and I do want to actually go into some specific things about your study at Oxford and Harvard, by the way. So right now, I want you to go into your experience later, just starting the university and how that came to be. So,
its origins were here. That's why I began with that.
Yeah. Okay.
So essentially the idea of this institution, or at least the vision for creating this university, happened when I was a student at Oxford in 1998.
Mm-hmm.
Literally I even remember the moment when I had this idea. Oxford, as it's among the people who know it, it comprises of several colleges. And so there are 30 plus colleges. Each student is a part of a college, as well as the university itself in terms of being enrolled in a course. So I, for one of my courses, would go every week to a college called All Souls College at Oxford itself. And the course was on crime, justice and the penal system. And I, literally in the first few weeks of my studies in Oxford, which was in 1998, October, I was so inspired by my experience there. And on one particular day, there was this flash of an idea.
Just one day?
Yes, absolutely. After having literally the first 3 weeks of my studies at Oxford, I had this flash of an idea that and the idea was more like, I was so inspired by what was happening to me there, the education that I was receiving there, the kind of faculty, the kind of intellectually vibrant environment, the learning ecosystem, and the kind of extraordinary scholars who are teaching and mentoring me and other students. And I asked the question, are there universities like this in India? And that was the question that I really asked.
Yourself?
Myself. And I did not know the answer to it because I was just 24 years old. I was just a graduate student. As I said, I had studied in two Indian institutions.
Right, yeah.
But I did not understand or knew anything about the higher education sector. And then that was an important moment, and that's why it was a moment where the thought process happened. The second important moment at Oxford was I was part of a college called University College, which, as I said, is one of the 30 plus colleges in Oxford. It was founded in the year 1249, and when I was a student there, we were celebrating its 750th anniversary. And the master of my college, a very distinguished former civil servant by name Lord Butler, whenever he spoke about the college, he will always say that we are the oldest college in the English-speaking world.
Mm-hmm.
And on one occasion, and when you use that phrase, I was struck by that. He would say, we're the oldest college in the English-speaking world.
Yeah.
And we were, of course, celebrating our 750th anniversary. And then on one occasion, I went up to him and asked him, you always say this English-speaking world. And then he reminded me about something that I had known before, which is that he said, well, you know, in your country, in your subcontinent, there were institutions long before Oxford, over 2,000 years ago, including institutions such as Nalanda, Takshashila, Vallabhi, and Vikramshila, long before Oxford and long before Bologna in Italy, which is little older than Oxford. There were institutions in the Indian subcontinent. And so that's why he used the phrase English-speaking world, so that it is an accurate description of the age of the institution. And that kind of struck me even more significantly, because at a point of time in history and Indian civilization and its heritage had contributed so much to the world of higher education and research, especially higher education and teaching and learning, and also and so I began to learn a bit about that history.
So those are what Sahana Auntie's books are also.
That's exactly right. Yes. Dr. Sahana Singh has done some interesting work on tracing that history, and there are other scholars who have been doing that as well.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get her on the podcast when I go back to Cornell
wonderful.
now.
Yes, and she of course has spoken about that, and she has written now 2 books on precisely tracing that history. But now it has become a great source of interest for many other scholars in India and beyond, about not just the history of it, but also the dynamics of those institutions, how they actually impacted society.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a joke about, you know, how Indians like to proclaim like everything. Yeah, we invented that first.
That's true.
Like, I think what's his name? The comedian starts with a V. What's his name?
One in India or the...
Yes, Indian comic. He's a famous guy.
Kapil Sharma.
No, not no. You know, it's fine. It'll come to me later. But yeah, so you learned about, you know, the Indian history of education, and then.
Well, what was fascinating for me was that we had so much of, you know, impact, and the more we read about it, at least I was conscious of the fact that Nalanda and Takshashila were truly global institutions. There were students and faculty who came from different parts of the world. It was also multidisciplinary.
Really?
Yes.
From around the world?
Absolutely.
They swim?
No, they traveled. If they had to come by boats, they came, but they traveled in different ways across different parts of the world to come. And now that history is becoming more and more fascinating for scholars to understand. And there are now, of course, we've been able to get scriptures and written documents from those times in other languages, including Pali and other languages. So there are scholars, in fact, a very distinguished scholar by name Shailendra Mehta. He has been doing research on that, and he's expected to publish a big book, really giving evidence supporting those claims. So I take your point that one can be slightly over enthusiastic about
But there's a lot of evidence that we did contribute a lot.
Yes.
And it's so big. It's
Yes.
hard for, such a big population to not.
Well, and I think it's important to be, rooted in, evidence.
Yeah.
And, good scholarship and good academic work should base upon evidence as opposed to making sweeping generalizations. So that's on this particular matter, we have provided the leadership of the world. So for me, I was fascinated by the fact that such things existed so long ago.
Yeah.
But at the
I
same
remember
time,
the comedian's name, Vedas.
okay.
Vedas has a joke about this. Like,
Okay.
arithmetic, first in the Vedas.
Right.
Yeah, so anyway, so that sparked an inspiration for you to see, okay, we did this first. Maybe we can reignite some of that passion.
And also, I think in more contemporary times, we have been lamenting about the fact in India that our institutions have not been doing great when it comes to global rankings and global recognitions. At least for the last decade, we have been talking a lot more about how we can improve the quality of our universities. For example, at the dawn of Indian independence in 1947, we had just 20 universities, and now we have over 1,000 plus universities. We have a 50,000 plus colleges. We have nearly 1,700 plus law schools. So we have a very large, expanded higher education sector. But when it comes to high quality institutions, when it comes to institutions of excellence, when it comes to research oriented institutions, there are very few, and that has actually impacted our international reputation when it comes to the quality of these institutions. So what was fascinating for me personally was that how can we build world-class institutions, building upon those good institutions which we have, several of them already in the country.
So at that time you had that thought that you
That's
wanted
exactly
to,
right, yes. Yeah.
even though you hadn't really experienced higher education.
Absolutely not. It was more like a dream.
Yeah.
I won't say anything beyond a dream, although it was it drew me to the pursuit of the dream, but I wouldn't call, at least at that time, it was a plan that I was all set to pursue. It was clearly an earnest dream that, there is an opportunity. If we could do this over 2,000 years ago, and those institutions, by the way, don't exist anymore. And so there was a very clear recognition that if we can provide that global leadership at that point of time, then why not reinvent and reimagine that institutional evolution to contemporary times.
Okay, so you're in Oxford, you had this idea. Did you tell anyone about it or just kept it to yourself?
So a little bit, some professors,
Really?
my mentors have talked a bit off and on, but nothing serious at that time. And of course, my then very close friend and classmate, Pratibha, who later became a wife, she knew a bit of my obsession even then.
Okay, but did she roll her eyes at that? Because I feel like, I don't know, was she receptive to the idea, or?
She always was like a very good friend in terms of supporting the idea. And, at that time it was very early phase of my thinking, but she equally was fascinated by the fact. And the interesting bit is, this is not a unique idea from the standpoint of almost every Indian student who ends up going to some of these amazing institutions would inevitably have an experience of a great education and an inspiring education. And it would have come to them that, there could be such institutions in India, and why can't we have, truly world-class institutions in India as well. Now, it's important to mention that there are institutions in India, including the IITs, the IIMs, and even some of the other, central universities and public universities, which have been at the vanguard of, high quality education. But there are far fewer in number, and in any case, in terms of the global benchmarking, there is a lot more that needs to be done.
Yeah, because they don't have, correct me if I'm wrong, but they don't really connect as much with other institutions, do they? Like IIT and...
Well, they do. But as I said, there are many IITs and many IIMs, and some of them do at the topmost level, but some others don't.
Yeah.
But I think it is fair to say that the larger focus with regard to quality and standards in Indian higher education has been more to do with the exclusivity and selectivity of its students, and to make it truly competitive from that standpoint, as opposed to emphasis on research and knowledge creation and publications and important findings and discoveries and things like that. So that institutions have not at least built around that idea.
Yeah, when I found out that like some IIT schools have a lower acceptance rate than Harvard, it's like that's funny. It makes sense with the amount of people that apply for JEE, but
and it's a phenomenally competitive and extremely bright people end up going to these institutions, and they graduate. And it is not just IITs. There are many other institutions as well. It is not a coincidence that Google and Microsoft are and other major companies are led by Indians, not just Indian Americans, but Indians who have studied done their schooling and their university education in India and have then gone abroad for their postgraduate education. So from that standpoint, there are these institutions which produce amazing individuals to the world.
Yeah, I'm sure Sundar Pichai is glad we're talking about it.
Yes, yeah. Indeed.
So you've had this idea. Now where does it go? What's the next step? What's the next big step that you just kept it to yourself?
No, I had it in the mind, and then I was convinced that I want to do something about it. But at that point of time, but I did not do anything more because I was just 24 years old, and my next journey was to pursue my next master's degree at Harvard. So I got admission to Harvard Law School. I moved to Boston and began the journey there. And quite remarkably, I was fascinated and absolutely inspired by my education at Harvard. And not only because of the institution itself, Harvard University is a great university like many other great universities in the world, but three things about Harvard and US really struck me and continue to be a source of inspiration. One, the extraordinary diversity that I experienced in the class itself that I was part of. It was a truly global university that I experienced right there. And what I mean by that is our class of LLM students, there were 150 of us. They came from 80 countries in the world. It was just phenomenal. I met people from countries that I just barely knew that existed, but I had actually people from those countries. So I was impressed by the global imprint that Harvard had in relation to higher education. The second thing I was fascinated more from the standpoint of the intellectual ecosystem that Harvard had was enormous emphasis on what happens outside the classroom. There are constant conferences, lectures, workshops, seminars held every day, not just at Harvard Law School, but at the Harvard University in general. You add the Harvard Kennedy School, the Harvard Business School, the Arts and Sciences, you are looking at 40 events a day. I mean, law school itself might house, and that also is very diverse. You'll end up having a judge of the US Supreme Court speaking on something, head of Human Rights Watch or Amnesty International coming and speaking about something, or the Brazilian foreign minister coming and speaking about the debt crisis. The diversity and the intellectually vibrant environment that the school was fostering was amazing. And the third bit was that something about America itself, that there was a push towards thinking big. And that happens in the classroom and outside, which is that you are there to study, but you are also constantly drawn to thinking about the big picture and the big impact that education can do. In some ways, you are expected to use your education and to have the privilege that comes with education for making a larger impact on the world.
Yeah, okay. So a few things. So first of all, the diversity part. I think kids today, and this is me included, because I thought about this while you were talking, I think we take that for granted.
Yeah.
Because we have grown up in an age where, with the internet, with communication, we have access to all kinds of people from the beginning. Yeah. From the get-go, we can access Asian culture, Japanese, Chinese, American culture, European culture, whatever culture we want to. In a big way, we can access it. And so then when we go to these universities, it's like, diversity, okay, yeah, cool. I know, it's not, these people aren't new to me. And so I think we do take that for granted. As much as, I have thoughts on the way diversity is pushed in the US, I do think that, I'm benefiting from having such a diverse range of ideas present on the campus from all these different backgrounds, however it's being pushed in there. And so I do think we do take that for granted. So that was an interesting point. But also, the idea of thinking big, right? I've seen that at Cornell as well.
Mm-hmm.
And tell me what you think about this. The way I've seen it is it's a choice. Like, it's given up as a choice to the students. Like, there are opportunities, and it's very easy to just let them pass by. It's very easy to not take, what the university is offering to you. It's very easy to be cynical about the fact that, I can't really do much.
Mm-hmm.
What am I going to do even if I try and, engage with everything that's there?
Right.
And so, maybe it was just natural for you, but how do you think you chose to? Because it's again, you said you were 24 years old. It's hard to say, I can make a real impact in the world.
Yeah.
How does that...
So I think first of all, there's one big difference between students who are far more privileged to be able to receive that education and others who are less privileged. And let me tell you why. For me, for example, I come from a middle class family in India. I would even say lower middle class. My parents are salaried employees. They are both largely in the government sector. My father is a professor, mother is a government doctor. And so for me to be able to come from Chennai, where I did my undergrad, to Delhi, where I did my law degree, was already a big deal. Not because Delhi University was expensive, but living in Delhi was. So my parents could barely afford that. So thinking about going to Oxford and Harvard was just not part of the deal at all. Mm. And so because I was fortunate to get 100% scholarship to go to both these places, it was such a privilege to be able to go there. And hence, with that privilege, you are also having this huge burden of responsibility that, you know what, this is such a privilege that you've got and you need to make something out of it. And so this is something, and I can't speak for others, but I do believe that a lot of us for whom this was an opportunity that came, as a privilege, we were more conscious, and I was extremely conscious of the fact that, you know what, I want to make something really big out of it. And I think that was always, that kind of connected very well with the American imagination of higher education, which is about, making an impact on society. And of course, education is part of social engineering. Education can dramatically change societies and all of that. But you made a very interesting point about this whole idea of access to global cultures. You're absolutely right. Two things were not as common as it is for your generation. One was technology. We were barely entering into the email phase of our evolution. I had an email account when I was about to go to Oxford in 1997, and that was just evolving. We were getting to use that technology, and travel was not as frequent and as common for many of us. My first plane journey effectively was when I flew to London. So for studying. So
yeah, mine was as well. I was 2.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you were 1. When you took your first plane. So the fact that technology and travel was not so frequent, the fascination for the global cultures
and
opportunity to see places and people was such a unique thing, and that was also part of the experience that we had being a student.
Do you think also you knew you were limited by time?
100%. Absolutely. We were essentially going through 2 master's degrees, one at Oxford, one at Harvard, 1 year or effectively 10 months. So wanted to make the best use of that time. It was a very limited time and wanted to do so much in that short span of time.
Okay, but I do want to dig a little deeper into something, because I'm not satisfied with the answer that, it's just because of your background. Because I would, and if you disagree with this, let me know.
Sure.
I think coming from a less privileged background, you'd be more inclined to want to earn money and go for a job that, makes your family more affluent and gets them out of whatever situation they're in. The idea that you go make a big impact in the world, I can see how that would also be something that you might be you might gravitate towards, but I don't see the
Okay.
direct link.
So that has a lot got to do with what I would loosely call very middle class values that I was exposed to. My parents instilled in a lot of the values that focused a lot more on why education is important and how education should impact society positively. So in some ways the aspiration was never, even though, and that's why we were never poor, but because we were in the middle class, we had sufficient resources, and my parents provided a lot of that for us so that they can push their boundaries to give us that quality of life that is clearly
Okay, yeah.
better than many others.
Enough to,
Enough
you
to
have to have the opportunity, but not enough to just coast.
not enough to pursue luxuries of life,
Yeah.
but to be able to still have a good life. So we would have vacations, we will travel, we will go to places, but we won't travel in a plane, for example. We would visit places, we won't travel, stay in 5-star hotels. So we had all those experiences of again a privileged family because of that middle class positioning that we were, but that what it ended up also impacting our lives is that both my brother and I think partly because of the fact that my parents were professionals and not probably coming from business background.
Yeah.
My mother is a doctor, my father is a professor. Income and pursuit of acquiring wealth was never pursued as an objective. While it was fully recognized that wealth was needed to fulfill many goals and aspirations of life, wealth alone and money alone did not attract me or never had any interest for me to pursue anything. So that was actually easy. At no point of time my pursuit of an option or an opportunity was correct. In fact, way before I took up my job in the US, when I graduated from law in Delhi in 1997, most of my friends were either joining the litigating bar to become a lawyer
In India.
or some of them were joining some corporate sector. I ended up joining the National Human Rights Commission because I was so much keenly interested in the field of human rights and was pursuing a research associateship at that time. Very counterintuitive for most people even of my generation then. So, fortunately or unfortunately, money was never part of the pursuit that I have ever had in my life.
Yeah. I have that problem.
Yes.
I think it is a little bit of a problem, but we don't need to get into that. Anyway.
But listen, it's very important to recognize that it's not that we have any disdain for wealth or dismiss the need for having adequate resources to pursue our goals, our interests, our dreams, our aspirations. It is that something more has to be attractive in that pursuit and not wealth alone. And I think, in my view, that is a part of the strength that I have, and I do believe that young people should cultivate that. I incessantly talk about an amazing book by a political and moral philosopher at Harvard, Michael Sandel, his book on what money can't buy, the moral limits of markets, when he actually talked about the idea of a society, and he is not, by the way, opposed to a market, economy, but he differentiates a market economy from a market society, and where the consequence of a market society, and according to him, is that it results in institutionalized forms of inequalities and institutionalized forms of corruption, both of which impact the kind of society we want to build. So, in some ways, this is one message I try to give to my students and share it with them, that try to pursue a calling in life, and of course money and thus the benefits of wealth will also come through that calling as opposed to the other way around.
Yeah, even his argument with the tyranny of merit thing that we saw. That's his other book. The argument he was making, from what I could gather, was that the things we should value in society should go beyond how much money someone's making.
Yes. Or success, for example.
Well, sure, but success defined the way it is today. Like,
correct.
Redefining success may be what we want to look at. And what I liked about it is he wasn't going about it in the way of we should take away success from the people who we think already have success. It's just redefining what that means.
Very true.
Redefining what our values are. Yeah, okay. So then what happened?
So Harvard was a defining year, undoubtedly, for all these reasons. And I actually began to think about this idea more deeply and began to establish a lot of relationships with people and met people, talked to them, slowly building up that idea. By that time, my friend Pratibha, who was my classmate at Oxford, both of us got engaged.
We'll talk about that later.
No, but it's important because we both together organized a conference at Harvard in April 2000.
You could have done that without being engaged too.
Well, because we were already working together on various things. And so that conference was important because we brought a lot of people from India and around the world on the theme human rights and Indian judiciary's constitutional jurisprudence. We brought some amazing jurists and from India, but also from US who work on India. The reason I mentioned that was that conference essentially brought to Harvard people who have done work on India and to kind of provide the Indian context, Indian legal and jurisprudential context to law and justice. And so we became also a forum for looking at, the state of legal education in India, the state of education in India, not in the conference theme, but when all of us met on the sidelines of the conference. In many ways, it helped me, get a sense of where India is as far as its own, journey when it comes to advancing its democracy, advancing its institutions, advancing its state of law and justice.
Were there a lot of non-Indians at the conference?
Yes, absolutely. It was an amazing conference. Not only, there are some amazing American academics who were there. Granville Austin, who wrote a famous book on Indian Constitution, Cornerstone of the Nation. Mark Galanter, distinguished professor at University of Wisconsin-Madison. He was there. He wrote a book on one of the most pioneering works on India's affirmative action. And then there were many American scholars, including people like Anne-Marie Slaughter, the director of the Harvard Law School Human Rights Program, Henry Steiner, Peter Rosenblum, Joel Feinberg, many distinguished Americans who either had strong international law background or who were interested in issues relating to the developing world, including India, comparative law, comparative constitutional law. They were present. Of course, there were a large number of students, including Indians. The conference theme was India, but it had presence from around the world.
And you got funded by Harvard completely.
And that's another amazing story, and I think that also speaks volumes about the way American institutions are designed. I still very vividly remember, Pratibha and I were sitting in the Langdale Law Library at Harvard Law School, and we were trying to put a budget, like students trying to do a conference, and I wrote an email to the then Dean of Harvard Law School, Dean Clark, and I didn't know him at all. He's a professor of corporate law. I've never got to meet him, with no interaction whatsoever. I just wrote an email to him that, dear Dean Clark, I'm an LLM student, and Pratibha and I are both studying here, and we are putting together a conference on the theme human rights and Indian judiciary's constitutional jurisprudence, and we are raising money and resources for airfare and accommodation for people from around the world, from India, and I need $20,000 to put together this conference.
That's change for them. And
let me say this, that literally in 6 minutes, I got a message from him, and that's quite. I don't think it's so common. I have to give credit to him. He said he said something quite amazing. He said, by way of my powers as Dean of Harvard Law School, I approved $20,000 for this conference. It was just extraordinary. It was almost jaw-breaking for me that such a decision could be taken so quickly, and he was supportive of
India,
it.
you'd have to submit.
Not just in India, but in many parts of the world, even in the United
I'm
States.
just criticizing the stereotypical way of
I mean, I would say this is quite exceptional anywhere in the world,
Sure.
including in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, 6 minutes, no one's gonna.
Yes, and and it all just happened very quickly. His office, I coordinated with the office and all of that. But that kind of gave me a peep into the mindset of institutional leaders. And maybe one can say I was very fortunate. I was at the right time, at the right place, or whatever. But nevertheless, that left with an indelible impression about the extraordinary vision on the basis of which these institutions function. That a kind of low pay grade student of the LLM program can write to the dean of the Harvard Law School asking for $20,000, which
but you had the audacity to ask.
Of course, I mean, well, that's something I'm known for. So
we'll get to that later. Yeah, sure. That must have set the foundation.
It was absolutely, it was,
right. Okay.
But I would say the fundraising bit started off even earlier. I would bring it to Loyola College Madras, University of Delhi. I did fundraising for Oxford as a student, where I would, that's more to gain some extra pocket money. And then also at Harvard Law School, I raised for the Harvard Law School's, fund development office.
Okay, so you get this conference together. I'm sure you made many, contacts there. Actually, I do want to ask you, how do you, maybe you don't feel this at all, but when you're meeting people for the purpose of, expanding your network, like whenever I think about doing that, I just feel weird about it. Like, cause I feel like it cheapens the relationship.
Yes.
When I think about it that way, even though I feel like I would be able to provide value, they would be able to provide value to me. I don't know. How do you do?
So the answer to the question is that I think it's important, if you are a person who is genuinely interested in the lives of others in whatever form, that should be the foundation of the relationship. And that's why I don't use the word network, for example. I don't like it. It's one of those, I would say, pejorative American words where you end up creating...
They don't use it pejoratively, though.
I know,
they like it.
I find it a bit pejorative because
I think
it's not necessarily the best way to, connect or at least overcome that feeling that you have, that feeling of discomfort.
But I don't see it in them. Most of them.
Yes, it's almost like an artificially concocted type of an arrangement where you are working hard to network.
Yeah.
But I think the way I look at it is that these are all, you should be a person who's genuinely interested in the other. Mm-hmm. And that's the bottom line.
Well, that's the basis of this entire podcast.
Yes, absolutely.
It's the only reason I'm doing this.
And I think...
I'm not getting paid.
Sure. But genuinely interested in the other, and regardless of their, potential ability to help and support or do anything about it. And that's what makes it even more interesting. So, and that's not something that I developed now. That's a quality that I had probably in high school onwards, or even more. I don't even remember. I was fascinated by, others. I was keenly interested in, and I made, friends and got to know people. But I was always interested in knowing more people by the sheer of joy and that comes with understanding the lives of others. And I was fascinated by all those journeys that I had before, be it coming from Chennai to Delhi and meeting new people in Delhi without even knowing the language, connecting with them. So so in some ways, all of that, so I never had any reluctance, like the kind of discomfiture that you talked about, that, if you are actually networking, you seem to be having some ulterior motive because of which you are networking.
Yeah.
For me, it wasn't like that. I was essentially meeting interesting people.
But that's the thing. Once I meet the interesting people, I want to develop a close relationship with them.
Good.
But it's impossible to do that with 20 people.
Of course, you are so right. And I think that's the part where one has to make some choices when it comes to, it's a part of it is also time management. How you effectively as a student, you have so many demands on your time, and you probably want to, cultivate those relationships and build it over a period of time. And that's not a unique problem. And I think everybody has that problem. How do we, nurture those relationships and make them meaningful and substantive, and yet when you don't have that much time to devote to each of those relationships.
Yeah. But I mean, it's weird though, because the conversations I've had in the US have been, not all of them, but a lot of them have been people genuinely saying, "Oh, I want to go network," and I'm talking about the pejorative that you're saying, like that. And I'm not really knocking them for it. I mean, if they want to do that and they're mutually engaged in it, it's not like either person thinks this is anything but that. It's a transactional relationship, and they get the benefits of that.
Well, there are two ways to look at it. It's like this, okay? So there are times when, let's say you go to a party, for example, and not so much at your level, but when you are a little bit older, when you are working professional, when you go to a party, and you have the party, let's say they have 50 people there, and then you have an hour or so, you might end up giving 10 cards and receive 10 cards out of that. So essentially you met 10 people. It may be possible that from that 10, you might find 2 of them interesting and are mutually interested to remain in touch.
Yeah.
Now, so from the standpoint of your initial planning to network, there's nothing wrong in going with that idea that, listen, I don't know whom I'm going to meet up here, and I'm not going to invest a lot of time, energy, resources, emotions, or whatever. But then if I do find some people, that's when. So it's like a filtering process.
Yeah, otherwise you lose that opportunity.
Otherwise, exactly, where you don't get to meet them. So I wouldn't worry about people using the word network, as such. But I see it from the standpoint of a platform to meet new and interesting people.
Yeah, I think that is holding me back a little bit. But I've started to let go of that more and be okay with not having extremely deep relationships with everyone.
Yes.
Even though I'd like that. It just annoys me that I can't have that. But there's only so many hours in the day.
And I think the nature of this exercise is such that in all these places, there are so many people who come from such diverse backgrounds. And unless you meet them in those contexts and to even have a preliminary conversation, you simply may not have an opportunity to essentially have any informed judgment as to who you want to be in touch or who you want to even have a second level interaction or meet outside that party or whatever. So to have an open mind is important. But by the way, that's a luxury I don't have anymore. I mean, I am now, my time as a student, I had that luxury. But today, when I get invited to so many such forums, unfortunately, I don't have the opportunity to meet a lot of new and interesting people. It's much more limited. My time is limited. So I think young people should make the best use of that opportunity.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that sentiment. I need to do it more. But anyway, getting back to the journey. So you get done with the conference, you've accrued some skills, you've finished your postgraduate education. I hear you tried corporate law.
Yeah, yes, that's right.
I want to get into that for a second.
So that's remarkably, so America is so interesting, right? So I had, my academic qualifications and interest has always been in the field of public law, comparative law, constitutional law, human rights, and areas like that. And somehow I did not get a single job in that field. And it's not somehow because I can understand why, because those are organizations which will prefer to either recruit an American or a green card holder because they don't need to pay for the visa. So I was trying for jobs. I wanted a job, and those are all, modest organizations which will have a modest salary, but more importantly, they don't want to hire a foreigner who they have to support their visa and the money that comes with it. So here I am looking for jobs which are like being paid 1/4 from the corporate salary, and I'm not getting any of them. And because I was also looking for a job, I got 2 corporate law firm jobs. So I ended up getting 2 of them and finally took up one. And clearly I was not cut off for it. But then, life's journey brings you to all those things, because, something that I don't know whether even you know this, but for a good part of my academic journey, professional journey, my aspiration was to get and work at a job and work for the United Nations. And so I was...
Well, you worked for the UN?
No, I never did. And I was about to say that, which is that while I was at Harvard Law School, even before I got any other job, I applied for one job at the United Nations mission in Kosovo. If you remember the year 2000, 1999, the Kosovo war had just happened in 98, and United Nations mission was established. And believe it or not, in March 2000, I am getting this amazing letter from the United Nations appointing me as Civil Affairs Officer at the United Nations mission in Kosovo. My dream job is to be there and to work in the field of human rights. And guess what? March 2000, July, Pratibha and I are about to get married.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Pratibha was clearly ready to work in New York.
Yeah.
And neither of us had any job, but we were looking for jobs. And as you know, US has, for foreigners or non-Americans who study there, they give 1 year of optional practical training visa. So our goal was to be there, but I was just ready to go to Kosovo for that moment. And it was so naive for me to think that I could actually get married and go to Kosovo and start a life there. Yeah, but that never had to happen.
You're not going to the army then.
So I said, regretted to that, and continued the job search. And finally, as I said, we got jobs in New York.
So you gave up your dream job from Emma.
I won't say that. It was the situation that I was in which simply would not have allowed me to be able to go to Kosovo. Although I must say that it was a dream job because it was unlike many other UN jobs which happens in big capitals, and mostly you are doing drawing room diplomacy. To be at the UN mission in Kosovo, supporting the humanitarian effort, and to actually see through the process would have been a totally different, a transformative experience which never happened. Because many things that we study in our books, especially in relation to international law, human rights law, humanitarian law, it would have been fascinating to actually see it being implemented and being part of that process on the ground in the field, as opposed to being a diplomat in New York or Geneva or somewhere else. But anyway, as I said, that was a short-lived dream that never was meant to happen. But then we got these jobs and decided to, take up those jobs. And essentially, after our wedding in July 2000, we began our jobs in September 2000 in New York.
Yeah. I like to tell people, and just I don't say it as an insult, you lasted 5 minutes in corporate law.
Well, 5 minutes was much shorter. I would say to be candid with you, it was never meant to be.
I know.
But I lasted for a year actually.
Yeah, but in terms of like...
Well, absolutely. I was looking for a job from day one.
Yeah.
After having landed there, which is for most people would consider as a dream job, I was trying to plot how do I escape out of this. So it was like... But
listen, were like 0 minutes.
I was in a fascinating... It was an amazing part of my life because they were paying a lot of money. Unbelievable amount of money. I was in this fancy office in F.A.O. Schwartz building, the GM Tower, right opposite to the Plaza Hotel in Fifth Avenue. Now Apple has come there. By that time, Apple was not there. I would go for fancy lunches in Fifth Avenue and Madison and Park and the interesting bit is that yes, absolutely, and right opposite to Central Park, we were living in a nice apartment in Battery Park City, and Pratibha was in an amazing firm and was enjoying her job, and I wasn't. And not because of anything in the firm itself, but that's something that, as I said, this is again very important because it's important for you to find what is your calling. And so very quickly I realized that that is not my calling in life.
Yeah.
And so I was plotting to leave, and I left in literally in 1 year, less than a year, in sometime in September 2001. Just after 9/11 actually, and then joined New York University as a visiting fellow. I was unemployed. The visiting fellowship doesn't pay anything. I had no income, but my
Did you show
wife,
them your check from the corporate job?
No, I mean, obviously they don't care.
You see what I'm leaving?
That's right. Well, it's another matter that they consider it as a great opportunity that they gave me to be a visiting fellow at NYU. So I got to basically, meet amazing people.
Yeah.
I took a course with Philip Alston, who's a very distinguished human rights scholar, and I met one of my extraordinary mentors, Peter Schuck, at NYU at that time. And again, that journey essentially also laid the foundation. And I got to dream about the idea of the university because, it's something which we don't realize it. Unemployment with no money whatsoever and pretty much would make you to think about extraordinary things because you have nowhere to go.
It's not a prerequisite. That's not necessary.
Well, I know, but listen, I had my support system, right?
Yes, that's
Pratibha was
on Mama's payroll.
So she was my angel investor.
Okay.
And she continues to be my angel investor because I started off with that big salary, and since then it has always been downhill in terms of. And she not only did very well, but was also making enough resources, and she was my primary caregiver.
To support two people. Yeah.
Financially supported, but also helped me to pursue the dream, because it would have been easily if I think everybody has their own story, but because she believed in this idea, not so much the idea, but whatever the idea that I was pursuing, she just allowed me to pursue that dream. Not only financially supporting me all through those years, but also emotionally supporting it. But think about it. I was in New York. Suddenly I don't have a job, and we are having this apartment for us to pay the rent. And then I tell in the month of April 2002 that, listen, not only I have a job here in New York, but I want to go to Japan and pursue a teaching opportunity, which is also not paying much.
Skipping ahead?
Well,
wasn't there some part with Peter Schuck and go?
Oh yeah, I just mentioned the part about the financial support bit about Peter, about what Pratibha was doing, which is, but coming back to this university story.
How did Tata and Achi react when you told them you were leaving the corporate job for?
Well,
my grandparents.
So obviously, my parents were concerned because of the fact that
Is anything is very progressive of you, letting the woman just earn the money?
No, two of them. Well, not progressive of me, but it was quite generous of her, because Pratibha could have easily told that, listen, this is not the deal. We were both supposed to, and New York is, as you know, expensive. Right? We have federal tax, state tax, city tax, and we were living a life which both of our family income was essential in some ways to live the kind of life that we were.
I've asked my man in the past where all the money from New York City is. He's like, it was all in the apartment.
That's right.
The apartment ate up all the money.
Absolutely. And so But then those I think it was essentially from October 2001 to March 2002. Literally those 5 months or 6 months were so important because, as I said, I had nothing to do. I was not only unemployed, but also had no plans as to how I will become employed. So it's a very interesting phase of life where I had nothing to do, nowhere to go. So Pratibha was providing financial and emotional support, and I was at NYU meeting interesting people, and the dream was beginning to become more active in my mind. I was getting restless, I was getting anxious, but I was also getting obsessed with the idea. And that's where I met Peter Schuck on one of the occasions at the basement of the NYU Law Library. And I began to chat with him. And Peter was so generous.
He was at Yale at the time.
He was a professor at Yale Law School where he would commute, but he had a dual appointment. He was also teaching at NYU, and he was living in New York City, and he would simply go, 2 days a week or something to go and teach. He was a tenured professor at Yale, but also quite remarkably, because of his extraordinary reputation, he had a appointment at NYU as well. So I would chat with him, he would entertain, and I got to hear him talk about the American higher education, especially the evolution of great schools, including Harvard and Yale, and he himself, and also NYU. And I met some other people, including a man by name Norman Dawson, Frank Upham, of course, Philip Alston, and John Sexton, and some amazing people. Each one of them had an influence on what I was planning to do, and I was drawing from those conversations and mentally preparing myself and planning, and the idea or the dream that was just a dream at Oxford was taking shape at Harvard, but was getting real, I would say, impetus when I was unemployed at a visiting fellow at NYU.
Right. Yeah. So what you're saying is I should create a scenario where I have no money and I'm reliant on someone else.
But you need a Pratibha in life.
To shame myself.
You need a Pratibha in life. That's when you can do it. So I was lucky.
I can just use yours.
Yeah, sure, of course. Yeah, that's right. You are lucky from that standpoint as well.
Anyway, so then you have some idea now. More influence, more...
So the good thing is I land up in Tokyo. I'm at the Beijing Gakuin University, and thankfully
Why did you want to go to Japan?
So that's a great question. As I said, I didn't know what to do, right? So I am like simply figuring out what I want to do, because it was a huge change in my life where I was having all these prestigious fellowships and scholarships, going to these amazing institutions, and then getting a job. Right? Pretty much the logical thing that ought to happen to my life is I got this dream job at a top American law firm making obscene amounts of money, and I should have just continued for the next 25 years and made it do what, and many of my friends are doing that, right?
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying, but you attribute that to your family values.
I won't say values, but I think it's the mindset that I ended up having, which is that I began asking the question very early on, is this my calling in life? Is this what that I want to do? And also, I was also very conscious from the very beginning that whatever I do, I would like to make an impact in the society at large. And that answer was so easy. Law firms do amazing things, and I think we need to recognize the important role that the law firms and others do in the corporate sector, but it clearly did not fascinate me personally.
Mama can't hear you. She's like,
no, it's beyond Mama. It's beyond Mama. I genuinely believe, because this is a dilemma, and I don't want young people. You're not just saying it. No, but I don't want young people to juxtapose these opportunities in that manner, and I think they will make a huge mistake to say, oh, you know what, I want to serve society, and the law firms are an evil lot, investment banks are an evil lot. I think that's a wrong and a myopic way to pursue it. What is important is, A, regardless of whatever you do, you pursue that with ethics and integrity. And B, you need to find your own calling in life. And that's a personal choice. What not just makes you happy, but where you find your space that you are actually feeling that you are making a huge impact. And if that is part of your calling, you should pursue it. So for me, it was very clear. It wasn't a difficult decision at all. So I land up in Tokyo. I'm there. And for the first time, I am realizing that being a scholar, a researcher, is actually fascinating. Because if you look at my journey all through, and listen, I am a son of a professor. But very interestingly, good part of my life, I was very clear what I didn't want to do. I didn't want to become a doctor. I didn't want to become a professor. Because both those were my parents' careers.
But I mean, you did.
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. Because, I mean, this is not unusual, right?
Yeah.
There are two things that can happen to parents, children of parents who pursue a particular career. Either children can grow up to believe that's what they want to do, or the right opposite. And for me, it was actually the right opposite. I didn't want to be a doctor, and I didn't want to be a professor. In fact, being a professor was never part of my idea for a very, very long time. Even when I went to these institutions, it was simply never part of the idea. And that's why I said it was UN that attracted me till I went to Japan and I was associated.
Yeah, okay.
In fact, I would say NYU as a starter, and then of course Meiji Gakuin University, and I was fascinated by what I had experienced in Japan.
Okay, so you land in Japan, you've landed a professorial job.
No professorial job. Listen, again, unemployment continues. No professorial job.
Fellow again.
Visiting researcher.
On mama's payroll again.
Yeah, mama's payroll a bit, but they took care of my local expenditure.
Stipends.
So they gave me accommodation and also some money to take care of my living expenses. But still, I am dependent.
Yeah.
My wife is the financier, but I can take care of my own local expenditure there.
Okay.